My name is Chloe Rhodes. I am the National Compliance Manager for Crysp. And Crysp is a dual business. So we have a digital compliance system that helps businesses manage their compliance. It's a really great tool to manage all your documentation in one place. And then next to that, we also have our physical health and safety team, where we go out and we carry out health and safety audits, fire risk assessments, along a whole host of other auditing for schools and other businesses.
What does effective use of CCTV look like in terms of promoting a highly secure site?
CCTV is a great way. It's a great thing to use as a deterrent for schools, especially when it's combined with external lighting. So if you are planning to use CCTV, there are certain things that you need to bear in mind, because what we can't do is just fit some CCTV to our buildings and then just go away and leave it. So when you're fitting the CCTV, we need to make sure that it's in a good position. So you want to be focusing on your external areas. If you've identified any blind spots around your school, and also, and quite randomly, any waste areas as well, because waste bins can be used in arson. They are used to be pushed up against a building and set on fire. So that's another good area to put CCTV coverage. You also want them in a position where that they can't be tampered with if anybody wants to try and come onto the premises. And once the CCTV is fitted, you also need to have signage on your building as well, so that you need to warn people that it is on site, it is fitted, and that they are possibly being filmed. That, you know, we need to have members of the public aware that is in action. Above external areas, another great area to have CCTV would be your entrance area. So if you have a main reception area, also final exits as well. If you have the funding, you can go further into the school building, corridors, any open areas as well. That can be really useful. And again, once you've got that CCTV in place, there are some other things that we need to do as well. So we also need to make sure that we have a CCTV policy in place. And that policy is basically going to outline what you intend to do with your CCTV and who's going to be able to access that documentation, that filming. We can't have everybody in the school accessing it, so only nominated persons will be able to use CCTV and view the CCTV footage. Once you've decided who can view that CCTV footage, you also need to create some documentation and ensure that these people are reading the policy every year, and make sure that when they've read that documentation, that they sign to say that they've read that and they've understood it. That's really, really important. Sometimes from CCTV access, you can get subject access requests. That's fine, depending on what sort of school you are. So if you are maintained, if you are still in your local authority, that will most likely be dealt with by the local authority. If you are part of a trust, if you're part of a MAT, there may be a process that you will go through with the central team, with your trust. So that, again, that will also form part of your CCTV policy.
What do leaders need to prioritise in order to maximise security of their site?
One of the things that you need to do to maximise your security is, I hate to say it, is documentation. Not everybody's favourite word, but there are some key documents that you will need to have in place in order to make sure that your security is top notch for your premises. So the main ones are risk assessments. So you would be looking at risk assessments for site security to highlight what are the hazards for your site, what hazards do you have for your premises, and what are your control measures that you're going to put in place to minimise those risks. Another one would be lone working, because at some point You may have a site supervisor, a caretaker that would need to loan work, but also your staff members as well. So what are we doing to protect those people in the school? Start and end of day procedures. So what's your process at the start of the day and at the end of the day? How do you open up the building? How do you lock up the building? What are you doing again? It all forms part of the loan working. What do you do? What's the process? Playgrounds and any grounds that you have, any fields, that also needs to be looked at and managed. So do you do any checks throughout the day? Do you do weekly checks, monthly checks? Doing perimeter walks, inspections. And we'd also look at documentation and risk assessments for visitors and for contractors. So how do you manage those people that are coming into your building, and what are the risks associated with that? Now, with contractors, hopefully you have a process in place, either again with your, if you are maintained through the local authority or through your trust, whereby a tender process has been taken and you have received all the relevant documentation for that contractor. So you know who is going to be coming into your building. Part of those checks will obviously be an enhanced DBS check. So you will have that information already. But also another key part of that is a set date for them to come in and do the work, because what we don't want is we don't want a contractor just arriving to your school at any time of the day and expecting to gain access in what is potentially an area with children in. And even if it isn't an area with children in, it could be an area that overlooks children, i.e. fencing or an additional room or an additional building. Visitors will also need to be checked if they're coming into the school. Ideally, if they have a DBS, that's great. We need to take that information and we need to check it. And as such, you will probably issue them with the correct badge or lanyard to identify that person. If they don't have a DBS, again, we want to be able to identify that they don't have a DBS. And that person will also, as you will know, will need to be supervised at all times whilst they're in your school. Another area as well is lettings. So a lot of schools have external groups that like to use their facilities, and it could be school hall, a room, a swimming pool, whatever it is on your premises that you have and that they use. We need to make sure that we've got the correct documentation in place for these people. So again, we're looking at insurance documents. We're looking at the processes, policies and risk assessments that they have. Are they using their own documentation, or will they need to use your documentation? If they have their own, have they shared that with you? Have you seen that? And do you feel that is fit for purpose for the activities that they're going to be carrying out there? And who's going to have access to the site and what times that they're having access to the site? Naturally, we don't necessarily want them to be having access during a normal school day. We want that to be after hours. And what are the risks involved with that? Will they come into contact with any of the children at the school?
Can you talk us through the importance of lockdown and evacuation procedures?
It's something that can cause quite a lot of apprehension and anxiety in schools, particularly when there's a mention that you need to carry out a drill or a practice. And that's understandable. There's lots of reasons why that could cause some anxiety for leaders. And some of those reasons, it could be that we've never done it before, so we don't really know what we're doing. Secondly, you may not be sure about how your children might respond to that situation, or even parents. And thirdly, if you've got a high number of children, or even one or two children with with special educational needs, that can cause issues as well, particularly children with autism. If there's a change to their routine, if they're sensitive to noises, it can be a really, really difficult thing to manage. So it's kind of building all that in together and managing it. One thing that I would always say is, if you're planning a lockdown drill, please make sure that you are communicating that to parents, make them aware of the situation, because it gives them the opportunity to discuss that with their children prior to you carrying out the drill. Secondly, again, really important to remember that lockdown drills, they're not always for really scary reasons. There could be a really innocent reason why you may need to do a lockdown drill. In the past, I've experienced it where there's been a wild animal on the premises, and for safety, it was just better that everybody was brought indoors. It could be that there is a fire somewhere nearby, and we're just keeping everybody in because we don't want everyone to breathe in smoke fumes. So there's lots of other innocent reasons why we would need to do a lockdown, but equally, we also need to manage a risk of somebody possibly coming into the premises and the risks involved with that. Now, lockdowns as a minimum, you want to be looking at doing a drill once a year. And prior to you doing that drill, there is some planning in place. So you need to decide, where are you going to evacuate the children to? What are the best areas in your school to evacuate the children to? We're looking for areas with little windows or little viewing points, areas where you may be able to draw curtains, draw blinds, block out vision panels on doors that can be locked, and areas that are dark as well. So that requires some thought as well. You also don't want to be having to run across the building. So ideally, the spaces that you are deciding on where to evacuate to, you want to be able to access those easily, especially if you've got children coming in from the outside as well. We also need to consider the children with a PEEP or children that may have a healthcare plan. So again, how are these children going to respond to a lockdown situation? We also need to consider children that may have been brought over from another country. So if they're a refugee, they may have experienced loud sirens, loud noises, situations where they've been told to hide in the past, and that can be quite frightening for them. So again, it's really important that the conversations are had beforehand with mum and dad, even a translator, to make sure that they're aware of what's happening and why we're doing it. That way, then when it comes to the drill, the child will hopefully be in a much more comfortable and safer situation, and it will be easier to manage. When you decide to do a lockdown drill, these need to be recorded. So we need very basics. We need the date when you're doing the lockdown drill, and also any notes. So what areas of concern have come from this lockdown drill? Were there any issues? Were there any doors that you couldn't lock? Any blinds that didn't work? Any children that were scared or making more noise, or just anything that you felt didn't go particularly well? We need to make sure that's recorded. From there, we can then improve. It's the same with fire drills. Make sure that you've got the notes there, because then when you do the drill again, you're going to do a better job. So whilst there's apprehension to do a lockdown drill, I can promise you it probably won't be as bad as you think it will be. And if it is, you can improve from there. It will get better. And once you feel like you've cracked that lockdown drill situation and you've done a really good job, then it's the time to maybe think about changing things up a little bit, create a different scenario, get your staff to kind of think about other situations, other areas that they may need to go to, moving children from one place to another. How can you do that? But that's only at the stage where you feel as though your lockdown drills are going really, really well.
Is there anything else leaders need to consider in terms of updating their risk registers?
Your environment. So where is your school based? Where are you in the country? What is your risk around your area? One great tip for this that would be really, really helpful is to form relationships with local groups, local authorities. So again, if you're part of the local authority, if you are a maintained school, you'll already have that relationship with the local authority there, and hopefully they will be feeding you information. If you're part of a multi-academy trust, it's great to have relationships with local groups. So it could be a community group, it could be the local police, the local fire station, and anybody else that works in your area, because this can help you to build a picture of what's happening around your school and in your area with people that live there. From there, you can then decide on what risks are there to your school and what you can do about that. So, for example, in the past, I've been made aware of a school which was very near to a probation building, which unfortunately did lead to a threat at the school, and the school had to go into a lockdown drill. Unfortunately, this school wasn't aware of the situation. Now, had they been made aware of that situation, provisions could have been put in place for that situation and for what they would need to do. Thankfully, it happened when there was no children present, and it was staff that needed to go into the drill. However, it's that lack of preparation that keeps people on the back foot. So it's really good to know what's going on in your area and who's about, and great to build those relationships as well. It's really, really useful. What you also would need to have in place is a critical incident plan or an emergency response plan. They all come in different names, but the guise is still the same. We need to have a plan in place. What are we going to do in an emergency situation, and how are we going to deal with that? And again, just like your lockdown drill, that's going to cover a whole host of issues, not just necessarily somebody coming onto your premises, but it could be fire, it could be the gas leak again, it could be wild animals, lots and lots of reasons why you would need to do that. And that plan is your guide. So in the event of something happening, you're going to be able to follow that document, and that's going to help you plan and carry out your next steps.